Words of Joy and Hope. It is the second Sunday of Lent, Year A, Matthew 17:1-9. And the commentary is by Father Fernando Armelini. A good Sunday to all. Every year, on the second Sunday of Lent, we are offered the story of the Transfiguration of Jesus on the mountain. What was it all about? Was it perhaps a miracle that Jesus did to show something of a hint of a paradise to 3 of his disciples, not all of them, only 3 privileged ones? If this were the case, today's gospel text wouldn't have much to tell us except to arouse a little envy with Peter, James, and John. The narration of the intense, disturbing spiritual experience that the 3 disciples of Jesus did is not about this. These were probably the most prepared to understand and to internalize what the Master wanted to show about his own identity. Jesus was not the Messiah that they expected, and to comprehend the Messiah of God that was Jesus was not easy for them. Only these 3 that perhaps began to intuit something more about Jesus than the others in a spiritual experience in which Jesus introduced them. To describe it, the evangelist uses biblical images, and this must be kept in mind, otherwise the message is lost. We will try to discover the meaning of these images. The reason Matthew has written this page is not to tell another episode of Jesus' life. No. He wanted to offer us the opportunity for us today to make the experience that these 3 disciples have done on the mountain. If we fail to contemplate the transfigured face of Jesus, we will not succeed in giving him the adhesion of being his disciples. We will not have the courage to translate into practice his life proposal. It is essential that we make this experience of the transfiguration of Jesus. In today's text, the evangelist wants to introduce us to this experience. Let us listen to this narration. "6 days later, Jesus took Peter, James, and John, his brother, and led them up a high mountain by themselves." The text begins with a date indication, 6 days later. In general, the gospel stories are placed next to each other without any indication of time. Why is it mentioned here, these days later? It is a clear indication to invite us to find out what has happened 6 days before. The group of disciples, along with the Master, were in Caesarea Philippi, and it was there that Jesus put this question to them: "Who am I to you?" And Peter had replied, "You are the Messiah." Jesus approved Peter's answer, and then he continued presenting for the first time what his destiny would be. He would go to Jerusalem, and there the elders, the chief priests, and scribes would judge and kill him. But this would not be the end. His death would be for a glorious destiny, the resurrection. Peter disliked this first announcement of Jesus' passion completely, disagreed, and taking Jesus aside began to rebuke him. The verb used by the evangelist is epitimao, which is the verb that Jesus uses when he expels demons. Peter is doing an exorcism on Jesus. "What do you say, Jesus?" In the Old Testament, it is not said that the Messiah of God will be under the protection of the Lord and that he will be a glorious victor. And Jesus will rebuke Peter and say, "You are Satan." That is, you want to hinder the path that the Father has set for me. Go behind me. Don't stand in front to show me the way. Go behind me, Satan, because you think according to the criteria of the world, not according to God. You follow people's reasoning, but you must get away from this reasoning and then be part of the new world group I am starting to form. The ancient world was one where the law was that of the strongest, who prevailed, dominated, abused others. So Jesus is forming this little group which must present an alternative world to the one of the old one. It will not be the world of the dominators, but of those who serve. And Peter doesn't want to accept it. What does Jesus do? He takes a group of his disciples, probably the most prepared to accept this novelty, and takes them to the mountain. And here begins the presentation of the necessary conditions if we want to be introduced in this experience of the discovery of the glorious face of Jesus, that is, of his transfiguration. And the first condition is to be accompanied by him to go to the mountain. The mountain is not a hill. The text says that it's a high mountain, that is, it reaches heaven, reaches God. In the Bible, the mountain indicates the world of God. If you want to find the Lord, if you want to accept his thinking, his way of evaluating, of judging, it is necessary to disconnect with the plane where all the people are, where certain kinds of speeches circulate, of reasoning, that have nothing to do with God's way of thinking. Peter thinks according to the common people because he is in the plane. And that is why Jesus now accompanies him, along with James and John, to the mountain to introduce him in the way of seeing the face of Jesus according to the light of God. Jesus moves away from the plane. And if we also need to make this experience, if we do not see this transfigured face, today's gospel text is useless. We must make this experience. Therefore, let Jesus accompany us to the mountain. Let us get away from the way people judge. The second condition, Jesus takes them apart. And this is what we are invited to do. If we want to make an experience of understanding the thought of the Lord, it is necessary to make for us a space where we isolate ourselves from noise, confusion, even the worries of everyday life that are important, but it is necessary to enter moments of silence, of solitude, to be able to think about the essentials of life. When we are totally absorbed by the problems of material life, of agitation, of stress, we end up by no longer having time to reflect and think. Let us now listen to what happens to those who maintain these moments of intimacy with the Lord. They depart from the way of thinking of the people and get involved in the thoughts of God. And he was transfigured before them. His face shone like the sun, and his clothes became light, white as light. And behold, Moses and Elijah appeared to them, conversing with him. What happens on the mountain? The three disciples see Jesus transfigured. The verb used is metamorphomai, which means that they have witnessed a metamorphosis. We know what is metamorphosis. The worm appears as something despicable, disgusting, but that is not its destiny and its identity. It is a butterfly, therefore it's beautiful, lovely. In his announcement of the destiny that awaited him, Jesus appeared as a failure in the eyes of those who are on the plane and who qualify a successful person according to their criteria. According to the criteria of this world, Jesus was not particularly attractive. He had introduced himself as the servant of the Lord mentioned by the prophet Isaiah. Despised, rejected by the people, man of pain who knows suffering, one that before his presence people cover their faces because they are frightened when they look at him, despised. He has no appreciation. Unjudged, as an executed, as punished by God. He is not a person to admire according to the criteria of this world. What happens on the mountain? Judgments and evaluations change. They are turned around. There you see the true identity of Jesus. This is what the disciples discovered. Jesus had to go through what people see as a failure to show them his true glory. That is the glory of the one who loves. And here two biblical images are used to present this metamorphosis which they have witnessed. His face shone like the sun. The sun is the image of the glory of God for the fullness of light it has, and especially for its incorruptibility. Sun posts were discovered by Galileo, of course, but before it was believed that the sun was perfect, incorruptible. This is the image of the authentic face of Jesus, presented like that of God who is sun, as Psalm 86 says, and wrapped in light like a mantle, as Psalm 104 also says. Then the white garment, his clothes turned white as light. The white color is a characteristic of the world of God because it always refers to light, and clothing is the outward manifestation of a person's identity, therefore, of his doing. And what is transparent about Jesus, about his clothes that he's wearing, what is it? It is light. And this light is nothing else than the love of God that manifests as light through Jesus. And in no one like in Jesus, this light of God's love has been manifested. These images of light also appear at Easter. The angel of the Lord, who descends from heaven, rolls a stone and sits on it, and its appearance was brilliant, and his snow white clothes. This light is the sign of God's presence, and God's presence in Jesus is perfect. It was the same God who manifested himself in all his glory. The glory of God is not a human success. It is the manifestation of his love. And now the evangelist brings two Old Testament characters to the scene, Moses and Elijah. Why do these characters appear in the story of the Transfiguration? Because both have climbed the mountain, and the disciples have also done that. And they went up the mountain to see the glory of God, but they did not see it. They intuited something, but they have not seen the glory of God, because the glory of God is only seen on the mountain when one finds Jesus. In him the glory of God shines in fullness. Moses had asked the Lord, "Show me your glory." And the Lord answered him, "You cannot see my face, because no one can see my face and live." And Moses enters the cave, and God puts his hand on his face and says, "You will see me when it is happened. You will see my back, but you cannot see my face. You cannot contemplate the glory of God." It is also the case of Elijah. Because he had killed the priest of Baal, he fled and was persecuted by Jezebel. He thought he had done a good thing, because the image of God that he had was that of a triumphant God, showing his power. Then he had escaped to the desert and was disgusted with God, because God was not on his side against Jezebel. This was the image of God that Elijah had in mind. He had not seen the true face of God, of the God who manifests his glory in love, not in the dejection of the enemies as he thought. And he climbs the mountain. There is the conversion of Elijah, the conversion of the image of God that he had cultivated. The earthquake, the manifestation through force, and thus imagined the strength of God. No, God was not in the earthquake. God was not in the fire. God was not in the impetuous wind that lifts the stones. Then a gentle breeze appeared, and Elijah covers his face, because the glory of God that he still could not see was passing. So only on the mountain there is dialogue. They come face to face with Jesus. The image that the apostles had of God should be confronted with a true revelation of the glory of God that is not that of power, but that of love. It is a strange glory, not expected. It is not what people expected. The image of a terrible God with sinners, a legislating and righteous God, a God who wants to be obeyed and to be served. No, it is the God of love, the God who has taken the form of a slave to serve people. And this glory had not been seen by Moses and Elijah. So that is why they must also confront the glory they imagined with the glory that shines in the face of Jesus. If we do not do this metamorphosis experience, and we don't realize that the glory is in loving, in giving life as Jesus did, then we will not have the courage to give our adhesion to this proposal of life Jesus asks of us. Let us now listen to Peter's reaction to this revelation he did not expect. Facing this metamorphosis of the slave that is now presented in the light of God as the Lord. Then Peter said to Jesus in reply, "Lord, it is good that we are here. If you wish, I will make 3 tents here, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." While he was still speaking, behold, a bright cloud cast a shadow over them. Then from the cloud came a voice that said, "This is my beloved Son, with whom I am well pleased. Listen to him." Peter exclaims, "Lord, it is good that we are here." He has been delighted with beauty. What beauty is it? First of all, the beauty of the face of God. The God we see in Jesus is beautiful. A certain image of God presented in catechesis in the past was not beautiful, and there are some who still maintain it. It means that they have not made the experience of contemplating the face of God in Jesus. Peter discovered it, and we are invited to see the beauty of this face by going up the mountain, separating ourselves from that image of God that we have manufactured to be able to contemplate the face of God we see in Jesus. And only that. Peter has understood that the beauty of the true man is the person who loves, who donates his or her life. So, is it enough to contemplate this beauty, or it must be translated into action? That is, return to the world in concrete life, also put on this beauty and this light, becoming transparency of the beauty that we have contemplated in Christ. If we have understood that the meaning of life is to donate it, it is necessary to start serving the brothers and sisters. Peter says, "If you wish, I will make 3 tents here." The one who builds a tent means he wants to stay there. But the contemplation of this beauty is not enough. It is necessary to come down the mountain, return to everyday life, leave the church, and start loving. Returns to work, to one's own social responsibilities, develop the profession that one has, but in a different way from how it was done in the plane. The profession is exercised to serve, not to emerge, to seek the boastfulness of this world. And our Sunday liturgies should be covered with this perspective, to be authentic and beautiful. Return to the world clothed in the light of Christ. Recall also that when Moses came down from the mountain, he had a lighted face. Also the Christian, if he or she really has been on the mountain and has contemplated the beauty of Christ, he and she returns covered with this light. It is what Jesus says, "You are the light of the world." Not our light, but the light that reflects that of God and that of Christ. While he was still speaking, behold, a bright cloud cast a shadow over them. It is another biblical image. It is the cloud that accompanied the people on the desert road. The cloud is like a caress. The cloud of God indicates the presence of God that envelopes those who have understood this beauty of Christ. And going down the mountains, you should have this feeling that it is the truth. Always feel involved on the tenderness of God that accompanies you in the concreteness of life. Then there is the voice of heaven. When this image is used in the rabbinic world, they want to present God's vision of what is happening. And this voice presents Jesus as the beloved Son. In the Semitic culture, Son is the one that resembles the Father and is presented here as the perfect image of the Father. In him the Father of heaven is pleased. He resembles the Father perfectly. This voice of God appears twice in the Gospel. The first in the baptism, when the heavens separate and the voice from heaven says, "This is my Son, my beloved, the favorite, in which I am pleased." But it does not say, "Listen to him," because he has not yet spoken. He has not shown his face yet. And it is at the beginning of the public life of Jesus. And the second time this voice is heard is in the Transfiguration, and adds, "Listen to him." Listening to him refers first to the proposal that he has made. If you want to come after me, give up thinking about yourself. Make the choice to be a servant to whom everyone can give orders. Offer your life for love. Listen to him if you too want to be sons and daughters of the Father in heaven. If you want this beauty to also appear that shines on the face of Jesus. And then listen to him. More than a mandate, it's almost a plea born of the tenderness of the Father's love that seems to tell us, "I suggest you, I beg you, I recommend you. Listen to him if you don't want to make a mistake in life." It is a strong proposal. Let us hear now what the reaction of the disciples is. When the disciples heard this, they fell prostrate and were very much afraid. But Jesus came and touched them, saying, "Rise and do not be afraid." And when the disciples raised their eyes, they saw no one but Jesus alone. As they were coming down the mountain, Jesus charged them, "Do not tell the vision to anyone until the Son of Man has been raised from the dead." The disciples fell prostrate and were very much afraid. And they were very scared because they have understood what it means to welcome in their own lives the beauty they have seen in Jesus. It means donating one's life. If someone is not afraid, it means that he or she has not understood. Perhaps they think that to be a disciple of Jesus is just enough to follow some religious practices. And with religious practices, one doesn't get scared. When it is understood that one's life must be donated, then one gets scared. Our natural instinct leads us to defend our existence, therefore to use all the surrounding reality, things, people, to project ourselves, to live our own life. Jesus asked for self-renunciation. The ideal of a person in the world is that the one who lacks nothing, the successful people, and uses everything and everyone to be well and enjoy life. This is not the beautiful man we find in Jesus. He makes another proposal of man, a realization of a life that is paradoxical because it is beyond of what can be verified, of what man can control. Afraid maybe that at the end one repents of not having enjoyed life as everyone else does. Not in serving others, but in serving oneself. And this is the fear of throwing the seed in the ground. And this is also what Jesus says. If the seed that falls on the ground does not die, remains alone, if instead it gives its life, then it bears much fruit. They are scared. Jesus came over, touched them, and said, "Rise and do not be afraid." Rising up means standing up. It is the verb of the resurrection. Don't be an old man, but a resurrected man to this new life that you have contemplated in me. When the disciples looked up, they only saw Jesus. Here is the invitation that Jesus also gives us. Raise our eyes to contemplate only Jesus' beauty and not to be enchanted by any other appearance of beauty that is the reality of the ideals of man in this world. I wish everyone a good Sunday and a good week.